What is going on, everybody? Today we have NFL Mock Draft 6.0 here. Just like a lot of my previous mock drafts, this one will be 3 rounds with trades. And remember, this is Predict the Pick. I am guessing what these teams are going to do. I'm not saying that I agree with these moves. I'm just predicting what I expect come draft night. I probably will have 1 or 2 what I would do mock drafts from now until the NFL draft does reach. So really, since my last mock draft 2 weeks ago, a lot has changed in the NFL landscape. We've had a bunch of pro days. Players' stocks have gone up. Players' stocks have gone down. Free agency has started. And obviously, most of the big-time free agents are off the board right now, which really changes things up for what teams need. And of course, yesterday, the bombshell in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers moving up to the 3rd pick with the Miami Dolphins, and then the Dolphins about 20 minutes later acquiring the 6th pick from the Philadelphia Eagles. So of those 3 teams who made trades yesterday, I'm going to briefly recap that. I think all 3 of them win. For San Francisco, you're giving up a lot. Pick 12, a day 2 pick, and 2 additional first-rounders. But to get a quarterback with elite upside in the Kyle Shanahan system, I think it's too hard to pass up. For the Dolphins, you're moving down 3 spots. You're adding a future first. I think that's great value. And there's a good shot that the player who they ended up selecting at 6 would have been their guy at 3. And then for the Eagles, I know a lot of people don't like it because they're not going to get Ja'Marr Chase or Kyle Pitts, which is true. But the Eagles have so many holes right now. I think adding a first-round pick next year is really big. And the Eagles might have 3 first-rounders next year since they had their own, the Dolphins, and the Colts conditional pick. So they could have a lot of draft capital going forward, but without further ado, let's talk about the trades that involve players real quick, and then we'll get to the actual mock draft. So there won't be as many player-for-pick trades in the mock drafts going forward compared to what I had like a month ago, because a lot of player-for-pick trades usually happen at the new league year, which is when free agency starts, so I don't think as many are going to happen as what I have originally been predicting. The first one is Sam Darnold going to the Broncos for a 3rd-round pick. It seems like the Sam Darnold trade market really is not that good right now. I do have the Jets picking a quarterback at 2, and spoiler alert, I don't have the Denver Broncos getting a quarterback in this year's mock draft, which is why I have them making this move. I don't think Denver's going to be as much of a trade-up possibility as people think. I think they like having more established veteran quarterbacks. I understand Darnold's 24. He's not really a veteran, nor is he overly established, but he's been in the league for a few years. I think there's still room for him to be salvaged, even though Adam Gase kind of ruined his career potentially. But I think unless someone falls to Denver or there's someone who they really like, I don't think they're going to move up. And I think this move for Darnold is a lot more realistic for them. There has not been a ton of chatter about the Orlando Brown trade possibility these past few weeks. I still think there's a good shot he gets moved. And I have him going to the Jaguars here, getting an elite, or I guess a potential elite offensive tackle. I don't know if I'd call him elite yet, but a very good offensive tackle who's still young without giving up a first-round pick. The Jaguars are giving Baltimore their 2nd-rounder, pick 33, a 4th-rounder, 106, and a future 4th next year. The Ravens are getting a pretty big haul for a player who, A, is a free agent after next year, and B, doesn't really want to stick around in Baltimore. And the Jaguars get their franchise left tackle because that's where Orlando Brown wants to play, so I don't have a problem with either side making this trade. It's been a very busy offseason in New England. They handed out big long-term contracts to players like Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, and Matt Judon, along with others. And with Stephon Gilmore's contract nearing a close within the next few years, I don't know if they want to pay him big money. So I had the Patriots sending Stephon Gilmore to the Indianapolis Colts for their 2nd-round pick. For the Colts, I think this is a great trade. Indianapolis really has not made many big moves this offseason as they were expected to. Well, here's the big move. They get a premier player at a premier position, and New England adding another day 2 pick. This feels like a very Patriots-esque move. That is all for the player-for-player trades. I do not have a Deshaun Watson trade. I've had a lot of Watson trades these past few mock drafts, but I don't think he gets traded until his whole legal situation is really sorted out, and I don't think that's going to end overly soon. I think there's a chance that drags after the draft, and I don't think teams are going to trade him with that baggage over his head. So I think the Texans are kind of getting unlucky here, and obviously for Watson, he is very unlucky because he has these allegations over him, especially if he's innocent, and if he's guilty, then he deserves whatever punishment's coming, but I'm not to talk about the allegations themselves, I'm just talking about the football aspect of it. At pick 1, I have the Jaguars selecting Trevor Lawrence. Not a lot to talk about there, that's pretty obvious. At 2, Zach Wilson still going to the Jets. I've had him going to the Jets in every mock draft I've done since my first one back in January. And for the past few weeks, I have been contemplating the idea that maybe the Jets do like Justin Fields better. But, I mean, watching Zach Wilson's pro day, I think Wilson has cemented himself as the second quarterback selected in this year's draft. And I feel like the league is just too split on Justin Fields. It seems like there are some teams who really like him, other teams who don't. And I think Zach Wilson is more likely to go here than Justin Fields. I don't think there's a 100% chance Zach Wilson is the pick, but I am ready to say there's an 100% chance that this is a quarterback going to the New York Jets. I'm going to explain why. So, it was reported yesterday that the Niners have been talking about trade-ups for the past few weeks. They've contacted the Dolphins at 3, the Falcons at 4, and the Bengals at 5. So, clearly, they thought the highest they could move up to was pick 3. This tells me that the Jets know who they're picking, and I think it has to be a quarterback. I think if they weren't picking a quarterback, they would be trading down, and they would have moved down with the San Francisco 49ers. So, I think it's really set in stone that the Jets are picking a quarterback, and it's not like the Jets and Niners didn't want to talk to each other. I mean, these organizations are connected. With Robert Saleh being hired by the Jets in January, and Saleh taking many 49ers assistants with him, I think because these organizations are connected, I think the Niners know who the Jets are taking it to, and that's why they're comfortable to move up to 3, get their guy, and I think it's probably Zach Wilson here to the Jets. So at 3, this is where the draft starts. Which quarterback will the Niners select? Because they're trading up for a quarterback. That is very obvious. It's going to be Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Mac Jones here. It's not going to be anyone else. And in my opinion, it comes down to Fields and Lance. I know some people think that Mac Jones is a great fit in San Francisco and that he might be the pick here. I don't think so, because I don't think the Niners moved up to 3, giving up all of that draft capital to pick a player who does not have elite upside. Mac Jones is a really solid prospect, and I think he'll be good early on. He's quite polished, but he doesn't have the upside you want in a 3rd overall pick at quarterback, whereas Justin Fields and Trey Lance do. And if there's a team who I would trust to develop a young quarterback who's raw, like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, it is San Francisco. So while Mac Jones might be better than those guys right away, I think the physical skills with Fields and Lance are too much. So that leaves us with those two. Who are the Niners going to select? I've been back and forth on this. I really think it could be either one. But I predict, as of right now, it will be Trey Lance. And when we get to April, if I mock Justin Fields here, I really wouldn't be surprised. I could see this pick going either way, but I think Trey Lance will be a really, really good fit here. And I think keeping Garoppolo makes a lot of sense. The Niners said that Jimmy G is still in their plans, and I don't think that's necessarily false, like a lot of people are saying, because if you pick a guy like Trey Lance, you don't want to start him right away. So having Garoppolo as a bridge quarterback for a year or two and picking Trey Lance, I think makes a ton of sense. If I'm Fields or Lance, I want San Francisco to pick me. And Trey Lance has to be ecstatic with this. So at pick 4, this is the most interesting pick in the first round, in my opinion, with the Atlanta Falcons. I think they're going to go one of 2 ways. Draft a quarterback or trade down. They need defense very bad, but I cannot see them picking defense at 4. The only defensive player I think could be considered here is Patrick Surtain II, and that's it. And even so, seeing how Jeff Okudah worked out at pick 3 last year, I don't think the Falcons want to use a top 5 pick on a corner. And that's no slight to Okudah. I'm a Lions fan. I love Jeff Okudah. I think he's going to be a really, really good pro, and I think he's going to rebound in a big way this year. But you just don't draft corners in the top 5 unless they're truly generational. Okudah was a great prospect, but I don't think he was a generational talent there. And I think the same can be said for Patrick Surtain. I think he's a very, very good player, probably the best defensive prospect in this draft, but I don't think he's generational enough to be selected in the top 5. So I've been on the boat that Atlanta should pick a quarterback, and I still believe that. If I'm Atlanta, I'm picking Justin Fields here, and I don't really have to think about it. Matt Ryan is 36 years old. He's still very good, but you're not going to get an opportunity to pick a prospect with the upside that Justin Fields does again, because Atlanta's not a terrible football team. But Atlanta has recently restructured and specifically backloaded Matt Ryan's contract. So I think they are committed to Matt Ryan going forward. Because of that, I think they're going to look for a trade. The only problem is it's kind of an awkward position with QB-needy teams. The obvious trade-up partner here is Carolina, because they need a quarterback very badly. They wanted Matthew Stafford a lot. They've been linked to Deshaun Watson. I think they'd love to get Justin Fields. But I don't think Atlanta wants to help their division rival get their franchise quarterback. I don't think that will make a ton of sense. I said earlier, I don't think Denver's going to be moving up for a quarterback. I think they'd rather someone established like a Sam Darnold or a Teddy Bridgewater or someone like that, maybe even Jimmy Garoppolo, who is far less expensive in draft capital. New England and Washington are two teams you could look at, but I don't think Atlanta wants to move back that far. So I have a different team trading up here, not for a quarterback. Penei Sewell is on the board. If he falls to 5, he's going to be the pick to the Bengals. So I had the Los Angeles Chargers moving up from the 13th overall pick all the way up to 4 in order to select Penei Sewell. The Chargers made some big improvements on the offensive line this offseason, signing Corey Linsley, signing the guard from Pittsburgh. I forget his name off the top of my head. But Matt Filer, that's his name, Filer, I think. But they still need their franchise left tackle, and I think the Chargers are giving up a lot here, but it makes sense because although you're giving up your second rounder this year, a future first, and a future third, that's a lot. But the most important positions in the NFL are quarterback and left tackle. Quarterbacks make a ton of money, left tackles make a ton of money. So if you can have an elite quarterback and an elite left tackle on their rookie contracts for the next 3 years, then that opens up a big Super Bowl window for the Los Angeles Chargers, who already have a pretty well-rounded roster for the most part. So I think this is a home run for the Chargers. I know they're giving up a lot, but if they can have the offensive line young, cheap, and very good, I don't see how this team is not a Super Bowl contender for the next 3 years. For Atlanta, if you're not going to pick a quarterback, this deal is a no-brainer. I think they should pick Justin Fields here, but if they don't go quarterback, then this is a fine route as well. So with Penei Sewell off the board, that makes things awkward for Cincinnati at 5. And I think they're going to be a lot more willing to deal with a team like the Carolina Panthers. There's no reason for the Bengals not to deal with Carolina. So I have the Panthers moving up 3 spots, giving their third rounder this year and a 1 next year to the Cincinnati Bengals to select Justin Fields. I think this is a great move for Carolina. Teddy Bridgewater is not the guy. He can be a bridge quarterback for a year or two, and I'd rather not start Justin Fields right away. But I think Carolina has a really good thing going. I think Matt Rule is really leading a strong culture change, and I think Carolina has a lot of pieces on both sides of the ball who are really good. For Cincinnati, if Sewell is off the board, yeah, you could pick Rashawn Slater here. You could pick a weapon here. But, yeah, I think trading down here makes a lot of sense. The player they picked at 8 is probably the same guy I would have given them at 5. So, you're adding a third and a future first. Boom, do it. No-brainer move for the Bengals. Pick 6, I have Ja'Marr Chase going to the Miami Dolphins. If the Dolphins stayed at 3, Ja'Marr Chase would probably be the pick. So, yeah, this is a great move for them. They need to get an elite receiver for Tua, and Ja'Marr Chase has a chance to be bad. Lions at 7. I am a Lions fan. I really have no clue where we're going because there are a number of different ways the Lions could go. I'd love to see us move down. I don't think there's an easy trade down spot here. So that leads us with a few players. We could look at a guy like Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. I trust that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes want high character guys. If they are not concerned by Micah Parsons' character and pick him, then I will trust that Micah Parsons' baggage with his character issues is not a concern. The Lions also need wide receiver very badly. Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle are both good options. I think Kyle Pitts is an option as well. I know we just drafted TJ Hawkinson a couple years ago, but Kyle Pitts is not a prototypical tight end. At the end of the day, I do have this selection being Devontae Smith. I think he'd be a great fit here. I think Waddle's a slightly better prospect, but I would not be mad at this at all. I'd be very excited to have the Heisman winner on my team. Devontae Smith had a great season this year for Alabama, and that kind of goes without saying, and he'd probably be the best wide receiver on this team day 1. Pick 8, Kyle Pitts going to the Bengals. I think he probably would have been the choice at 5. Either him or Ja'Marr Chase, probably Pitts. And I understand the Bengals' offensive line is terrible. I understand they didn't really invest in it in free agency. I know they signed Riley Reiff, but Riley Reiff is not going to stop them from drafting a certain offensive lineman. They could look at Rashawn Slater here. I think that'd be a fine pick. But Kyle Pitts is a very unique prospect. We've never really seen anybody like him enter the league. And I think it's going to be hard for the Bengals to pass that up. On to pick 9, I have the Denver Broncos selecting Patrick Surtain, cornerback, Alabama. I think it's more likely that the Denver Broncos would use this pick on Mac Jones than trading up for a guy like Trey Lance or Justin Fields. I don't know, I just have a weird feeling about Mac Jones and the Denver Broncos. I think it could make sense, but with the Sam Darnold trade, they don't need Mac Jones. They don't have a ton of holes, but I do think they could use to add another corner. I know they signed Kyle Fuller, but he was only signed to a short-term deal, and Patrick Surtain is probably the best defensive player in this draft. I think that'd be a nice pick. At 10, the Dallas Cowboys. I understand they need corner really bad. Surtain would be the pick if he was here. He's not. Caleb Farley probably would have been the pick 2 weeks ago, but it really seems like the injury concerns with Caleb Farley are really starting to mount on some people, and I'm not so convinced he's going to be used with a top 10 pick. J.C. Horn had a great pro day. He's just really starting to get some top 10 buzz. I could see him here, but I think value-wise, Rashawn Slater makes more sense. And I've been saying that the Cowboys need to invest on the offensive line. When they had the best offensive line 5 years ago, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. They need to really redo that. Travis Frederick's retired. Zach Martin is still very good, but he's getting older. Tyron Smith's still very good, but he can't really seem to stay on the field. I understand that they have one of the better tackle tandems in Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins, and you could always put Rashawn Slater at guard year one and eventually groom him to be the long-term left tackle. I think Slater to Dallas makes a lot of sense, and I think it'd be a win-win for both Slater and the Cowboys. So at pick 11, the Chicago Bears are desperate. They know, or I guess Ryan Pace knows, that this is it for him and Matt Nagy. I think they're going to be aggressive to get a really good player and a potential game changer here in a guy like Jalen Waddle. So I had them moving up to the 11th pick, giving up picks 20 and 52, along with a future third-round pick. For the Giants, there weren't a ton of obvious selections, and some guys they could look at here would still be on the board at 20. And then for the Bears, you get an elite receiver prospect in Jalen Waddle, who probably should not have fallen this far. The Bears do not have a lot of receiving talent outside of Allen Robinson. I know Darnell Mooney looks like a nice late-round find last year, but he's not enough. And, I mean, if the Bears are committed to winning with Andy Dalton this year, you got to help Andy Dalton, you got to protect him, and you got to give him weapons. This is a big get in the weapons department. The Eagles cannot be thrilled about this because Jalen Waddle will be a great pick at 12, but it's not like the Eagles don't have other holes. So I have them selecting J.C. Horn, cornerback out of South Carolina. I know wide receiver is a big problem, but I don't think there's a receiver worth selecting with this pick. And they also need corner really bad, so I think J.C. Horn would really work here. And I think Horn has played himself into top 15, maybe even top 10 consideration. At pick 13, the Atlanta Falcons select Kwity Paye, edge rusher out of Michigan. He had a really, really good pro day. I think there's a good shot he has cemented himself as the top edge rusher in the class. And it's a very tight race. There are like 5 or 6 guys who can really make a case to be the top edge rusher in the class. I think Paye here to Atlanta makes a lot of sense. And I think he'd be a nice get for their defensive line who could use some more explosive pass rushers. At pick 14, the Minnesota Vikings are up. They're a team who likes to move down, and they're a team who likes to acquire as many draft picks as they can. Last year, I think they had like 16 total picks. So I have them moving down 4 spots. The Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins let go of Kyle Van Noy. Linebacker's a pretty big hole, and Micah Parsons is still on the board. So the Vikings get pick 18 along with a third rounder, pick 81, and the Dolphins' 7th round pick. So the Vikings are adding 3 picks here for the price of 1, and they're only moving down 4 spots. So I think this is a deal they would really like. And for the Dolphins, Micah Parsons probably won't fall to 18. New England, I think, could consider him. The Raiders, I think, could look at him as well. And maybe other teams spooking the idea of potentially moving up. So I think the Dolphins want to make sure they land him, and they do just that. Pick 15. The Patriots need a quarterback, but I think they're committed to at least trying one more year of Cam Newton. I think they really built around Cam's strengths in the offseason, specifically short passing game, because his arm going deep is totally washed. And I think they want to try it out one more time with Cam. So I don't think they're as much of the Mac Jones destination as people think. And the player who New England would have picked here at 15 is probably still going to be on the board at 19. So I had the Washington football team moving up, giving the Patriots pick 19 in a third rounder. Ryan Fitzpatrick is very inconsistent, and he's only probably a one-year rental. So you need to get your franchise quarterback. A lot of people don't think Mac Jones is going to be on the board here at 15. I think there's a very good chance he'll be taken by now. But if he's not, I think Washington might want to pounce on this opportunity. And then at 16, we've seen Arizona really swing for the fences this offseason, and that's what they're doing again with Caleb Farley, who's a very polarizing prospect. Athletically, Farley is a freak. You could argue he has a higher ceiling than any defensive player in this year's draft class, but there are some concerns. He is new to the cornerback position. He originally went to Virginia Tech to play wide receiver. He did not play this year due to opting out, and he's had a lot of medical question marks. He did not participate at his pro day this past week because of a back issue, and he's actually getting his back repaired. So he'll probably be good for training camp, but there are just too many medical question marks with him, and I think he will be knocked out of top 10, and there's a shot he could slip farther than this, but Arizona is really trying to go all in these next few years, and I think getting a player of Farley's upside here in this stage of the draft, it's going to be hard for Arizona to pass that up. The Raiders went from one of the best offensive lines to one of the worst offensive lines within the span of around 3 days this offseason, so I think they're definitely going to want to address the offensive line. They could still look at the front seven. A lot of the best edge rushers are on the board. Actually, all the edge rushers except for Kwity Paye. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is still here. I've mocked him to the Raiders a lot. That pick would still make sense. But I still think they are going to want to build in the trenches. And Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech probably should not have fallen this far. So, although Colt Miller is fine at left tackle, sometimes you just have to go for value. And that's what Christian Darrisaw here is at 17. He's probably a top 10 to 15 player in this class and should not have fallen this far. So, really good value for the Raiders. At 18, I think Darrisaw would have been the easy pick here for the Vikings. But Elijah Vera-Tucker is also a very easy selection. The Vikings have holes at both tackle and guard. Vera-Tucker can play both. In my opinion, I think he'll be more of the guard at the next level, but there are some people who think he could be a really good tackle. I think he could just plug him into left guard day one. The Vikings did a big hole there, and he would be really good. So I like that pick a lot. New England at 19, I have them selecting Greg Newsome, cornerback, Northwestern. Newsome would have been my choice for them at 15. So this is a good move for New England. They get a third-round pick for Washington moving up to get Mac Jones. Newsome has really risen a lot during this draft season, and he's the prototypical modern-day corner. He's a big, athletic guy. He's been very productive at Northwestern. He had a great year. He's never really managed to stay healthy for a full season, which is a concern, but I mean, he has the height, he has the length, he has the size, he has the athleticism. He really gives you all you want, and New England could use another corner, especially with Stephon Gilmore gone. At 20, Jason Oweh, edge rusher out of Penn State, another one of the more polarizing players in this class, going to the Giants. Oweh is very raw. He is very unpolished. Did not record a single sack this year at Penn State, but the athletic numbers at his pro day this week were unsurprisingly off the charts. We knew he was going to test really well, and he did. I think his 40 time number was 4.36. Keep in mind that a lot of these pro day times are inflated, so that 4.36 is probably more like a high 4.4, which is still absolutely absurd for someone who can have his hand in the dirt as a defensive lineman. And, I mean, athletes like this don't come often. So, although he's raw and he's not great right away, I think some team's really going to bite the bullet, and I think that team could be the Giants. At 21, the Colts, they need an offensive tackle. Anthony Costanzo retired. I understand Tevin Jenkins has more experience at right tackle, but I think he's probably the best tackle on the board. And, again, kind of like Christian Darrisaw, I understand that Darrisaw is more of a left tackle. I understand that Jenkins is more of a right tackle. But sometimes you have to pick the best offensive lineman that's fair. For the Raiders at 17, it's Darrisaw. For the Colts at 21, it's probably Tevin Jenkins. 22, great selection here for the Tennessee Titans. They select Rashad Bateman, wide receiver out of Minnesota. I think this is really, really good value for them. Corey Davis is gone. They haven't really addressed receiver in free agency, so it's pretty much just A.J. Brown and a bunch of practice squad level players. They have to address receiver early in the draft. They don't have to do it necessarily round one. If you go into the draft in the first round saying, we're picking X position in round one, that's a really bad idea. You have to draft for value, but obviously you also have to look at your needs. There are plenty of receivers throughout this draft, but Rashad Bateman is an outstanding value pick. So it fits value and it fits need. Home run for the Titans. At 23, the New York Jets select Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, linebacker out of Notre Dame. He's a very versatile player, and I really like Owusu-Koramoah. I think he's a borderline top 15 player in this class. I think this would be a great pick for the Jets. I think this would be a really nice fit, and it's great value. Steelers at 24. I think Tevin Jenkins makes a lot of sense. He is gone. There's still a lot of good offensive linemen who they could look at. Liam Eichenberg, Jalen Mayfield, Alex Leatherwood, guys like that. Dylan Raduns, although it's probably earlier for some of those guys. But the Steelers need a running back. James Conner is gone, and Najee Harris is the chance to be a potential all-pro level player very early in his career. I think Najee Harris will go round one just because of the immediate impact he can bring. I think the Steelers really want to win next year. I think they know this is probably it for Big Ben. And if you can give him their best running back since Le'Veon Bell in Najee Harris, I think this would be a really solid selection for Pittsburgh. At 25, I have the Jaguars selecting Christian Barmore, the top interior defensive lineman in the class out of Alabama. As you'll tell, I really focused on offense in this year's draft for the Jaguars. Obviously, they got Orlando Brown. And in day 2, in the second and third round, I gave Trevor Lawrence some weapons, as you'll see later in the video. But you cannot neglect the defense. It's not like their defense was very good last year. Christian Barmore is really solid value, and they could use some help in the middle of that defensive line. Barmore can get after the quarterback. He's a solid run stopper as well, and I think he has a chance to be real, real good. Browns at 26. They have a very well-rounded roster. I think, really, if you can get a good value player, specifically on defense, I think that'd be great. And I think that's what Zaven Collins can be. I think the Zaven Collins buzz the past few weeks has kind of tailed off a little bit, but I could definitely still see him going in the first round, and I think he should go in round one. I think he's really, really good. You don't see guys 6'2", 260 moving the way he does. I think he's very versatile. He can make plays in the backfield. He can drop back into coverage, and I think the Browns are really going to love his versatility. Ravens at 27. This is a pairing I've had a lot, and I really like it. Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher out of Georgia. I think this makes too much sense. I really like Azeez Ojulari. I would love to see him go to Baltimore because I think it's a great fit. The Ravens have a strong track record of developing raw and athletic, bendy edge rushers like Azeez Ojulari, and I think he'd be a star with the Ravens. At 28, the New Orleans Saints select Jalen Phillips. This is certainly an interesting pick. Trey Hendrickson, of course, gone. He's signed with the Cincinnati Bengals, and they need guys who can go after a quarterback. New Orleans is not afraid to take risks, and that's exactly what Jalen Phillips is, a massive risk. Talent-wise, he's a top 10 player in the class, and I think because of that, there's going to be a great chance that he does not fall here, but there are medical concerns with him. He medically retired at UCLA, then he got a second opinion, was cleared to play, transferred to Miami, and was awesome this season. But, I mean, if the injuries come back, specifically the concussions, that could be a major problem. So, there are major medical red flags, but if you're comfortable knowing that and recognizing how good Jalen Phillips can be, then it might be worth a shot to really roll the dice. And the New Orleans Saints are a very aggressive team. They're not afraid to take risks. I think this really would make a lot of sense. 29, the Green Bay Packers lost Corey Linsley in free agency. I think the Packers have had a very bad free agency, and as a Lions fan, I'm not really complaining about it. I think they should have prioritized Corey Linsley over Aaron Jones, mainly because A, don't pay running backs, and B, A.J. Dillon played well down the stretch last year, and the Packers really haven't made a ton of other moves. They've re-signed Kevin King. That's not great. They haven't really improved some of their holes, specifically adding another corner, adding another wide receiver, and they don't have a center as well. Well, they're crossing out their center need with Creed Humphrey, who is a freak athlete. He's a really, really good player, and I think he'll probably be picked before the other top center, Landon Dickerson. Dickerson is coming off a torn ACL. You really can't go wrong either way, but I think it's more likely Humphrey is the top center off the board. At 30, this is kind of like the Saints getting Jalen Phillips. Gregory Rousseau probably should not have fallen here, but this is kind of how the board played out. The edge rushers fell a lot later than they probably should have, and I understand Rousseau might not be the most natural scheme fit here in Buffalo, but he has a ton of potential. He only really played 1 year, and in that 1 year, he showed a lot of flashes of being an elite pass rusher. The Bills do not have an elite pass rusher. They have a very well-rounded roster. Their defense has a lot of good pieces, specifically in the back end with great safeties. Tre'Davious White's an all-pro level corner. Great linebacker tandem in Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, but they don't have that star on the defensive line. Gregory Rousseau has the chance to be just that, and I think this could be a really good pick for them. Chiefs at 31, they let both of their starting offensive tackles go, and they don't have any new replacements. They did draft Lucas Niang in the 3rd round last year. He'll probably start at right tackle, but you need a left tackle. Liam Eichenberg is a safe plug-and-play guy, and I think that is a really solid selection here for the Chiefs. You don't need to be taking a swing for the fences. You just need to go for an easy swing, get a single with Liam Eichenberg, who may never be great, but he'll be a good player off the bat. And then at 32, I have a trade. The Buccaneers could go a number of different ways, but I think Elijah Moore will probably be a first-round pick, and the Eagles have a big hole at wide receiver, that goes without saying. So I have the Bucs trading pick 32 to the Eagles for picks 37 and 123. That is Philadelphia's 4th. I think Elijah Moore will go in the first round. I think teams are really going to like him. I think he'll go higher than people expect, and for good reason. He's a really, really good prospect, and he'd probably be the best receiver on the Eagles day one, arguably, which is more so showing how bad the Eagles receiving core is. But I think Elijah Moore will make a very early impact out the slot for Philly. Here at 33, the Ravens just got this pick in the Orlando Brown trade, and I have them selecting the Orlando Brown replacement in Jalen Mayfield, the offensive tackle out of Michigan. Mayfield's a very interesting player and a very interesting fit to Baltimore because the Ravens could use help at tackle with Orlando Brown gone and guard. Signing Kevin Zeitler does help, but they still could use left guard, and even more so, they need right tackle. So I think Jalen Mayfield, who does have a lot of experience at right tackle, could slide right in there pretty early on and be very solid for the Ravens. At 34, Travis Etienne, running back, Clemson, going to the Jets. They do not have really good running back on the team at the moment. I think their top guys are like Michael P. Ryan and Ty Johnson. I mean, those guys are not home run hitters, whereas Travis Etienne can be. Etienne is very good in the passing game, which I think will certainly be good news for Zach Wilson. Get a short passing threat who can make plays with the ball in his hands. Really like this pick for the Jets. At 35, the Atlanta Falcons need safety very bad. Ricardo Allen, Devontae Casey, and Keanu Neal are all gone, so they need replacements. Trayvon Moehrig is the best safety in this class. He probably won't fall this far, but if he does, this is a no-brainer selection for Atlanta. Keep in mind the Falcons do have 2 second-round picks, thanks to the Chargers trading up in round 1 to get Penei Sewell. Dolphins at 36 select Javonte Williams, running back North Carolina. I think Williams is right in the discussion with Najee Harris and Travis Etienne as potentially being the top back in this class, and I think he's very worthy of this pick. The Dolphins need running back quite badly. They did not want to pay anyone in free agency, which is wise, but I could see them using a day 2 selection on a guy like Javonte Williams. 37, a name we really haven't talked about, Milton Williams, interior defensive lineman out of Louisiana Tech. Going to the Buccaneers, I think Williams is pretty versatile. The Bucs really don't have many weaknesses. I think they could have looked at a running back at 32 had they not traded down. But with the next 2 guys gone, I think that's kind of crossed off the list. I think they would go with interior defensive line or edge here. And I think Milton Williams could be an intriguing player. 38, the Bengals did not use their first-round pick on a lineman. They did not really improve their line a ton in free agency, so they have to use some selections on O-line. Alex Leatherwood is a very solid player. Does he have the size and length to play tackle? That's the question. If not, he could be a good guard. You have Jonah Williams, who can also play both tackle and guard, so having guys who are strong in positional flexibility, I think that could work out nicely. Brady Christensen, tackle BYU to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers did not trade their second-round pick in order to move up to get Justin Fields, so they still have this pick. They franchise tagged Taylor Moton, but they could use another lineman. Brady Christensen had an awesome pro day yesterday for BYU. I know all the attention was on Zach Wilson, but 31 teams showed up to that pro day for a reason, and not everybody was there to scout Zach Wilson. Brady Christensen's a really good prospect. His measurables were very impressive. He tested well athletically, and he had a great season. So I think he's really propelled himself in this second round, possibly sleeper first round pick territory. And I like this pick a lot for the Panthers. At 40, the Broncos do need some linebackers. I think we could have a linebacker run early in day 2 with guys like Nick Bolton, Jabril Cox, and Jamin Davis still here as well. But I've been selecting Baron Browning, who had a really solid end of the year for the Buckeyes, was very impressive at the Senior Bowl. And Denver needs some more help in the front 7. I think Browning would be a nice pickup. Here at 41, I had the Lions moving down 4 spots with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think I've had a move similar to this a couple times. The Jaguars moving up from 45 to 41, giving pick 145 in the process to Detroit to select a playmaker. For the Lions, this trade makes a lot of sense. The same player who they would have picked at 41 is on the board at 45, and they add a day 3 pick. The Lions currently only have 2 day 3 picks at the moment, so this would be a good move. For Jacksonville, give Trevor Lawrence some more help. I've had Kadarius Toney going here a lot to Jacksonville, and he is still on the board, but I've been selecting Rondale Moore instead, and I'm very curious to see which of Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney ends up getting drafted first. I think a lot of people are very split on this. Some people think it should be Toney. Some people think it should be Moore. Rondale Moore had a very interesting pro day the other day. He only listed at 5'7", but he also ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, and he benched like 20-something reps off the bench. So he tested well athletically, but 5'7" is quite short. Regardless, he's a very interesting and dynamic playmaker, and I think it's going to be hard for a team like Jacksonville, who could use some more guys like that, to pass up. Terrace Marshall Jr. should not be on the board at 42, but he falls, and the Giants are not going to complain. They're going to pick him up. I think he's a top, probably 20 player in this class. I'm super high on Terrace Marshall. I've really liked him from the start of draft season, and that hasn't really wavered. I think he is one of the more overlooked prospects in this class. People know he's good, but I think he's better than people expect, and I think this would be really a value for the Giants. I know they signed Kenny Golladay. I know they have talent at receiver, but I think they could use another guy, and I think Terrace Marshall will be great. The Niners could use some help at guard. They did not trade any second-round pick in order to move up to pick 3 yesterday, keep in mind. So they have all their second-round picks, including this year going forward. Wyatt Davis is probably a first-round talent. There are some medical question marks, but he's really good. Eric Stokes going to the Cowboys, corner out of Georgia. If they don't pick a corner in the first round, I'd imagine they're going to pick one here in the second round if the value presents itself. And Eric Stokes is pretty good value, so this would be a nice choice. Jabril Cox, linebacker out of LSU to the Lions. The Lions need more linebackers, specifically athletic, rangy linebackers, because the previous regime did not do a very good job of drafting players like that. Jared Davis was very bad in coverage. Jelani Tavai, dear Lord, he's just bad at everything. He's not very good. But I think Jabril Cox could be pretty good, and I'd be pretty happy with this pick. Kadarius Toney going to the Patriots at 46. This is a very interesting selection, and I think it makes a lot of sense for their building for Cam. Kadarius Toney, I think, has the potential to be a really solid player who can stretch the field. I know he's gotten Tyreek Hill comparisons. I don't think he's the next Tyreek Hill. You have to be able to run a 4.25 in order to be the next Tyreek Hill, and Kadarius Toney just isn't that fast. However, Toney is a ridiculously good playmaker with the ball in his hands. I think Toney can be a good gadget player and a good short passing guy who makes a lot of plays with the ball in his hands. And I think those are the types of players that New England is going to look for. Guys who can make plays after the catch to help move the team downfield, because it's not going to be Cam throwing 30-yard plus passes. The Falcons obviously got this pick from the Chargers. They select Asante Samuel Jr., corner out of Florida State. I'm really curious to see where he ends up, because his stock, I feel like, has fluctuated a little bit. At times, people think he's a first rounder. At times, people think he's a late second rounder. So I'm curious to see if he ends up going in the first round or not. Here, I don't have him going in round 1. I don't think he will, but I think it's possible. And then Nick Bolton, he probably should not have fallen this far, but there are a lot of interesting day 2 linebackers, and I just happen to have him going after Jabril Cox, Baron Browning, and Zaven Collins. I could see Nick Bolton being the third linebacker off the board behind Micah Parsons and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, if you count Owusu-Koramoah as a linebacker. So I think Nick Bolton here would be really interesting. The Raiders have heavily invested in linebackers the past few years. Well, I guess mainly last year, maybe not before that. But they gave big money to Corey Littleton. They signed Nick Kwiatkowski. Doesn't really look like those moves are really going to be all that great. So they're going to need to add another one. The Arizona Cardinals have given Kyler Murray a lot of weapons, but why not add more? Pat Freiermuth, tight end out of Penn State. He probably shouldn't fall this far, but Arizona's not going to complain about it. Dan Arnold is gone. Not that he's spectacular anyway, and Pat Freiermuth very well could still be the pick here had Arnold stuck around, but the Cardinals don't really have a starting caliber tight end. Now they do. Joseph Osai, edge rusher, Texas, to the Dolphins. I think he fits the scheme pretty well, and I think this is a pretty good value, so not a whole lot to talk about here other than the fact that this would be a very nice selection. Samuel Cosmi falls to 51. Washington's going to capitalize. A lot of solid day 2 offensive linemen. Cosmi very well could go in the first round. I know he's gotten first round buzz a lot. I don't think he will. This might be a little bit too far for him to drop, but I don't know. I think the media is higher on him in the league personally. That's just a guess. I very well could be wrong. But the Washington football team will certainly be happy to have him give Mac Jones some more blocking. Landon Dickerson, center, Alabama, to the Giants. They don't really have a good starting caliber center. Now that changes. Landon Dickerson should be healthy once the season starts, and I think he'd be a nice pick. Kelvin Joseph, cornerback, Kentucky, to the Tennessee Titans. Adoree Jackson and Malcolm Butler are both gone. They need to improve their cornerback situation, and I think Kelvin Joseph could be a solid starting corner in due time. Levi Onwuzurike, interior defensive lineman out of Washington, to the Patriots. They got this pick in the Stephon Gilmore trade. Onwuzurike is really solid value here at pick 54. We know Bill Belichick likes to have strong offensive lines and strong defensive lines. I think Onwuzurike would be good value, and I think he'd make a nice impact early on. Pick 55, Dylan Radune's offensive tackle, North Dakota State, to the Steelers. They have to improve their offensive line, and they have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They did lose some pieces. Tyson Alualu is a big loss. Mike Hilton as well. Obviously, Bud Dupree too. So they do have some holes on defense, but their offense is really what cost them down the stretch last year. Now they have a potential game-changing running back in Najee Harris, and they had a good offensive tackle in Radune's. The Seahawks, I think, have to go the best offensive lineman on the board with this pick. I don't mind Ronnie Perkins. I think he's a solid player, but they have to pick offensive line. Russell Wilson is sick and tired of getting hit. The Seahawks have never bothered to even try to build a good offensive line around Russ. Now that Russell Wilson is 32 years old and is starting to get frustrated, you have to at least attempt to build a good offensive line. At least show Russ that you're trying. Ronnie Perkins is a fine pick here, and I think Seattle does need more guys going after the quarterback, but this isn't the pick I would make. There are still very good offensive linemen on the board. Trey Smith is an interesting player. Still some good tackles left. So, not a bad selection, but again, I know I don't like locking myself into a certain position. I don't think he should do that in the draft, but I think this is a very special scenario where the Seahawks have to draft the best offensive lineman on the board, unless there's a prospect they absolutely love at another position, and maybe that guy's Ronnie Perkins. I don't know. Rams select Jackson Carman at 57. He'd be a good pick to Seattle at 56 as well, for what it's worth. But Jackson Carman's a really intriguing player. Does he have the size and length to play tackle at the next level? Personally, I don't think so. I think he's going to be a really good guard. Maybe he could develop into a solid tackle, but I think especially early on, he'll probably be best at guard. Dyami Brown, one of my big sleepers in this draft, and it seems like the Dyami Brown bandwagon is kind of gaining some steam. So I was kind of the one who started that. I'll take credit for starting the Denzel Mims wagon last year. I was super high on him for a while. Dyami Brown is kind of like my Denzel Mims of last year. I'm not comparing them as players, but I was higher on Denzel Mims before everyone else was, so I feel kind of cool about that. And I think Dyami Brown is really, really good. I know Ravens fans really want a game-changing receiver. They didn't really get that in free agency. They signed Sammy Watkins yesterday. I mean, he's fine. But the Ravens do have a lot of other holes. They've certainly addressed 2 of them in the draft so far, getting Azeez Ojulari and Jalen Mayfield. And this is a great receiver class, and here at 58, I think this is really good value for Dyami Brown. Davion Nixon, interior defensive lineman out of Iowa. He's kind of fallen a little bit, but the Cleveland Browns are not going to complain. They're going to scoop him up. Pretty good pick. At 60, Amari Rodgers, wide receiver, Clemson, to the New Orleans Saints. Rodgers is very good. He was Trevor Lawrence's go-to guy. And it seems like a lot of people have really hyped on the Amari Rodgers hype train. I wouldn't be surprised if the league as well has kind of hopped on the train as well. I think Amari Rodgers very well could go in the second round. The Saints need more receivers. They lost Emmanuel Sanders. Boom. This is your Emmanuel Sanders replacement in the slot. At 61, speaking of slot, very good nickel corner here in Aaron Robinson out of UCF. Bills need nickel corner. I think this is a really, really good pick. Robinson and Elijah Molden are two very solid nickel corners who the Bills could look at here. I think Robinson will probably be higher than Molden, but I think either one would work. This is a really interesting pick for the Packers. A few years back, they selected Equanimeous St. Brown with one of their late-round picks. It didn't really work out. Now they're drafting his brother, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is the better prospect. I don't think them being related should drive Green Bay away from this. I know Equanimeous St. Brown didn't really work out. Just because they're brothers doesn't mean you should avoid Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a different player to Equanimeous. The Packers do need help at receiver. That kind of goes without saying. You could look at getting an offensive tackle. You could very well look at corner here. But you've addressed center with Creed Humphrey. Now it's time to make Aaron Rodgers even happier. Get him a weapon in St. Brown. 63, I have a trade. The Detroit Lions will be moving up. They're going to send Kansas City pick 71 along with 145. The Lions just got 145 from Jacksonville in the trade I had earlier today for Jacksonville moving up to get Rondale Moore. So essentially, the Lions turned picks 41 and 71 into 45 and 63. That seems like fair value, especially considering the Lions picked the guy at 45, who they would have picked at 41 anyway. And the player I have Detroit trading up for here is Elijah Molden, the defensive back out of Washington. I am convinced we're going to use a day 2 pick on a defensive back. Obviously, our GM, Brad Holmes, comes from the Rams. The Rams have had success in recent years drafting defensive backs on day 2, and they've drafted a lot of defensive backs in day 2 recently. Just look at John Johnson, who's really good. They drafted a corner in the 3rd round a few years ago. I'm blanking on his name. Was it David Long? Might have been David Long. Taylor Rapp was a 2nd round pick. He's another example. We do have 2 solid corners in Jeff Okudah and Amani Oruwariye, but we don't really have a slot. Elijah Molden can play the slot. He can also play safety. And I would like to add another safety. I think Tracy Walker's a pretty good player, but he's our only starting caliber safety on the roster right now. And then at 64, Carlos Basham Jr., edge rusher out of Wake Forest. The Bucs need to get a little bit younger on the edge. Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul are both very good. Barrett is locked up, but JPP's not getting any younger, so I think adding another pass rusher would be pretty beneficial. Now on to the 3rd and final round we'll be covering today, starting with the Jaguars at 65. They still have a hole at tight end, but not much longer. Brevin Jordan falls into their laps, and they are going to gladly capitalize. Brevin Jordan, really, really good player. I don't think he should fall this far, but Jacksonville's going to take advantage. Janarius Robinson, edge rusher, Florida State. Not a name we've really gone over yet, but he's risen up draft boards the past few weeks, and I think the Jets do need some more help when it comes to getting after the quarterback. The Texans' first pick of the day is Ifeatu Melifonwu, cornerback out of Syracuse. I think this is solid value. Could be a solid outside corner early on for Houston. And the Texans might not be that terrible this year. They've made a lot of interesting signings. They have a very new-look roster. And obviously the Deshaun Watson drama is not great. They don't have their starting quarterback for next year, most likely, assuming Watson is gone. Well, I guess they could start Tyrod Taylor. I guess he's not terrible. But, I mean, if they can not worry about the Deshaun Watson drama, either trade him or keep him, and it's all settled, I think the Texans could be a solid team next year. Jamin Davis, linebacker, Kentucky. This is great value for the Falcons. I don't think he'll fall this far, but that's how the board played out. And him and Deion Jones, that's going to be a nice duo. Trey Smith, guard, Tennessee, with the 69th pick to the Bengals. Nice. This is a really interesting prospect. Talent-wise, Trey Smith is arguably a first-round pick. He's really, really good. There are some medical question marks with him, but if he stays healthy, the Bengals are getting a stud. Richie Grant, safety, UCF to the Eagles. They have to improve the secondary. They had some practice squad type players starting for them at the end of the year, and I think Richie Grant here in the 3rd round would be good value. Benjamin St-Juste, cornerback out of Minnesota to the Jets. He just joined Senior Bowl. He's done a nice job these past few months building up his stock. The Jets need a corner pretty bad, and I think St-Juste would be a nice pickup. And then the Chiefs at 72, adding another offensive lineman, Quinn Miners, the center out of Wisconsin Whitewater, the Senior Bowl darling, and he has certainly been the draft community's favorite player these past few months. He's definitely played himself into third-round conversation. Kansas City has used both of their top 2 picks on offensive line, which I think is probably their biggest hole going into the year. So, Liam Eichenberg, Quinn Miners, and you add an extra day 3 pick. I think Kansas City's done a good job so far. This is the 3rd rounder the Bengals got from Carolina when the Panthers moved up to get Justin Fields. The Bengals select Joe Tryon, an edge rusher out of Washington. They lost Carl Lawson. They did sign Trey Hendrickson to replace him, but I do think they could use to add more pass rushers. Tryon, very solid player. I think this would be fair value. One of the more interesting picks in this draft is Javon Holland of the New England Patriots. New England got this pick from Washington in the Mac Jones trade up. Bill Belichick likes versatile defensive backs. The Patriots have used some day 2 picks recently on DBs, guys like Kyle Duggar, Joejuan Williams, and neither of those picks really look like they look great. Those players could still develop and be solid, but I mean, we just saw Patrick Chung retire the other day. I think Bill Belichick's going to want to add another versatile chess piece in the secondary, and that's exactly what Javon Holland is. I think this is great value for New England. Really like Holland, really like this pick. Another player who I really like is Osa Odigizua, the interior defensive lineman out of UCLA. He's a little bit undersized, but he's very athletic, has a ton of upside, and I think the Cowboys could use some more help there in the middle of the D-line. Cam McGrone, linebacker, Michigan, to the Giants. Blake Martinez was a pleasant surprise last year, but their linebacking core still is not great. They could use another guy. Quincy Roach, edge rusher out of Miami, going to the LA Chargers. This is their 2nd pick of the day. The first one was Penei Sewell. Obviously, they did not have their 2nd rounder. For a while, I've had this pick as Josh Myers, the center out of Ohio State, but with the signing of Corey Linsley, another former Ohio State center. Corey Linsley was Ohio State, right? I'm pretty sure. But obviously, with signing him, they don't need a center anymore. So I think they're going to add another pass rusher. Melvin Ingram is probably not coming back, and I think Roach is very solid. Cam Sample, edge rusher out of Tulane, to the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota could use some more pass rushing help. Danielle Hunter is not enough, and Danielle Hunter wants a raise. And if he doesn't get that raise, he might want out, according to a rumor that came out a couple weeks back, early into the free agency period. If you're the Vikings, just do whatever you can to keep Danielle Hunter. You cannot let him go because he's such a good player. But even if they do keep him, they need more. He's not enough. Raiders with back-to-back picks. They got 79 from Arizona in the Rodney Hudson trade earlier in the offseason. Las Vegas selects Tommy Togiai, interior defensive lineman out of Ohio State. I think they could use some more guys in the middle of that D-line. And then at 80, a player who I've liked for a long time, Hamza Nasir-Ladin, safety linebacker hybrid out of Florida State. I think adding a versatile player who can play safety, he can play in the box, do a lot of different things. I think the Raiders are really going to like that. And I think Hamza Nasir-Ladin to Las Vegas makes a ton of sense. Minnesota got this pick 81 from the Dolphins in the Micah Parsons trade up earlier today. The Vikings select Ardarius Washington, safety out of TCU. Minnesota lost Anthony Harris to the Eagles, and they need a new safety. Harrison Smith is great. He's not getting any younger, and they don't really have a clear starter at 3 safety. They just signed Xavier Woods today. That's a sneaky good signing, but he was only to a 1-year deal. It's not a long-term signing. I still think they could look at a guy like Ardarius Washington. 82, Monty Rice, linebacker out of Georgia to the Washington football team. He's a big sleeper of mine. I really like Monty Rice. And Washington does the linebackers. Their defense is really, really solid, but they are missing a piece or two. And if they can hit on a guy like Monty Rice, this defense could be one of the best in football. James Hudson, offensive tackle, Cincinnati to the Bears. This is Chicago's first pick since Jalen Waddle at 11, them trading up with the Giants. They need more help on the offensive line. James Hudson, probably the best tackle on the board. You could argue Walker Little or Spencer Brown might be the better pick here, but I think Hudson works as well. Chaz Surratt, linebacker, North Carolina to the Philadelphia Eagles. They need linebackers pretty bad. They've never really tried to address linebacker with Howie Roseman in recent years, but I still think Chaz Surratt will make a lot of sense here. Aylin McNeil, interior defensive lineman out of North Carolina State to the Titans. The Titans need a lot of help on defense, but if they do have the strength, I think they have a lot of good pieces on their D-line, specifically Jeffrey Simmons, but I think they could use another guy, and I think McNeil would be a nice pickup. Nico Collins, wide receiver, Michigan to the Jets. I don't want to say he's one of my sleepers because I think a lot of people like him, but I really like Nico Collins. I think he's a top 50 player in this draft class, and he should not be on the board at 86. That's an absolute crime. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones a lot last year. He went far later than he should have. And Nico Collins, another high recruit, went to Michigan. I think Collins was probably the better player in college than DPJ, although you could argue both of them were a little bit underwhelming at times. But I really like Nico Collins. I think he's a very, very good prospect. Steal for the Jets. Something else kind of funny about this pick is for a while I've had Nico Collins mocked to the Titans in the second round a lot because I think there are some similarities between him and Corey Davis, and I thought he'd be a good Corey Davis replacement. Now he teams up with Corey Davis, but I still think this is a good fit. I still think the value's fair, and I still really like it. Tyson Campbell, cornerback, Georgia to the Steelers. They lost Steven Nelson and Mike Hilton this offseason. I know those guys are more traditionally inside corners. Tyson Campbell not necessarily overly similar, but they need to address corner, and this is really good value. I don't think he can really pass up Tyson Campbell here this late in the third round. And then Josh Myers, center, Ohio State to the Rams. Adding another offensive lineman. They already picked Jackson Carman earlier today, but it never hurts to double down on the O-line. And I think Myers can be a early impact player for LA. Here at 89, the Cleveland Browns select Peyton Turner, edge rusher Houston, another defensive player for the Browns. They've gone all defense so far with Zaven Collins, Davion Nixon, and now Peyton Turner. I think this is a very solid start to the draft. The Browns have another pick, as you can see very shortly, a player I really like in Tutu Atwell, but we'll talk about that one in a second. At 90, Kendrick Green, guard Illinois to the Vikings. He tested very well at his pro day. I think he's moved himself up into day 2 consideration. I know I had the Vikings pick Elijah Vera Tucker, but it never hurts to add more offensive linemen. Ezra Cleveland was drafted as a tackle last year. He is listed as their starting right guard on the Our Lads depth chart website. I think that's a really good website for depth charts. Not that everything is perfectly exact to what the teams do, but I always think it's a good representation. But, I mean, having versatile linemen like Ezra Cleveland and Elijah Vera Tucker, I think that allows positional flexibility, and I still think getting a guy like Kendrick Green here would be a nice pick. Speaking of Tutu Atwell, I just briefly mentioned him a minute ago. He goes to the Browns here at 91. They don't have a massive need at receiver. Odell Beckham, I think, will not be traded. I don't think they should trade him. I think Baker not playing well because of Odell is a lie. I understand that Baker was better last year when Odell was out. That's true, but I don't think it's because of Odell Beckham necessarily. But Jarvis Landry's great. Rashard Higgins is back. As I said, I really like Donovan Peoples-Jones coming out last year, and I still think he has a lot of potential. But it does not hurt to add more, and I think Tutu Atwell here at 91 is strong value. Walker Little is one of the more intriguing players in this draft class. He has not played really at all for the most part in the past 2 years, but he was once regarded as an elite tackle prospect, and technically he hasn't shown anything to suggest that he isn't an elite tackle prospect. So I could see him going a lot earlier than this. Someone might fall in love with his early tape at Stanford and want to pick him. In this mock draft, I have him falling to 92, but I could see him going way earlier, but this is a great move for Green Bay. Tylan Wallace, wide receiver, Oklahoma State to the Buffalo Bills. I think Tylan Wallace is really solid value here at 93. The Bills did lose John Brown. Boom, here's your John Brown replacement. The Kansas City Chiefs have so many good playmakers, so it feels weird saying that they could need another one, but they kind of do. I mean, if you look at their receivers, they have Tyreek Hill, who's a stud, and after that, there are a lot of question marks. I really like Mecole Hardman, but he's not overly consistent. Demarcus Robinson is not great. Byron Pringle, he's not special. So I think they could use to add another receiver with Sammy Watkins gone. And I think that's Dwayne Eskridge. He's not the biggest guy, but I think he can make a strong impact pretty early on for Kansas City. And I think this will be a solid selection. And then the Bucs at 95, so like Michael Carter, running back, North Carolina. They used a third rounder on Keyshawn Vaughn. I thought that was a pretty bad pick at the time. And, well, it proved me right. Keyshawn Vaughn did nothing last year. I know they have both Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. I know they just re-signed Leonard Fournette, so you may think that they don't really need a running back, but neither of those guys are great in the receiving game, and they're both on one-year contracts. So I think having a really good receiving back in Michael Carter makes sense. You could have picked Kenneth Gainwell here, Gainwell won't have to wait too much longer, as you'll see very shortly, but Michael Carter is a really good player. I think he's a little bit safer of a pick than Kenny Gainwell, so I think this is pretty solid for Tampa Bay. I said Kenny Gainwell would not have to wait too long to be picked. He goes here at 96 to New England. Another versatile playmaker who will make an impact in the short passing game. I know it's a little bit cliche to compare Kenneth Gainwell to Antonio Gibson, both guys coming out of Memphis. Both were running backs with wide receiver experience, but I do think there's a lot of similarities between the two of them, and I think Kenneth Gainwell, New England, makes so much sense. Not only do I think they need another threat out the backfield as a runner, but another short passing threat for Cam Newton. I love this pick, A+, home run for the Pats. Seth Williams, wide receiver, Auburn to the Chargers. Williams is one of the few players who you could argue had a disappointing pro day. Kind of ran a slower 40 than expected, but I think the Chargers could use one more receiver. Mike Williams is on the last year of his contract, and I think Seth Williams would be a nice addition. Elijah Griffin, cornerback, USC to the Saints. They could use another corner. Marshall Lattimore was just arrested the other day. I don't think that changes a whole lot. He'll maybe receive a slap on the wrist from the NFL, but I think the Saints need another corner anyway. I do think they want to re-sign Lattimore long-term. Hunter Long, tight end, Boston College to the Dallas Cowboys. They have struggled to find their Jason Witten replacement. Dalton Schultz is okay, but I do think they might want to add another tight end. Hunter Long and Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame are both solid options here. Dylan Moses, linebacker, Alabama to the Tennessee Titans. They could use some more linebacking help. They did re-sign Jayon Brown, albeit for only a one-year contract. Rashaan Evans is not under contract forever either. I don't think they're going to plan on paying both of those guys. So I think Dylan Moses will be a solid pick. Lions going to add another receiver, Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions use 2 of their first 4 picks on wide receiver. We drafted Devontae Smith at 7, now adding Anthony Schwartz, who's more of a slot guy. Schwartz ran a sub 4.3, which wasn't an overly surprise, but he did run super fast. The Lions have addressed receiver a little bit in the offseason. We signed Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman along with Caliph Raymond. I mean, none of those signings are really a big deal. I think Schwartz could make an early impact. Paulson Adebo is really good value here at 102. I don't think he should fall this far. San Francisco is going to scoop him up. They need some more help at corner. They traded their other third-round pick, 81, to the Dolphins. I think it was pick 81. I might have gotten the exact number wrong. But they traded a different one of their third-round picks in the trade to move up to 3. Shaka Toney, edge rusher, Penn State to the Rams. I think they could use some more bodies going after the quarterback. James Wiggins, safety, Cincinnati to the Ravens. There are a lot of fringe day 2, early day 3 safeties who the Ravens could consider here, but I had this pick being Wiggins. And then the final pick of the day is Pete Werner, linebacker, Ohio State to the New Orleans Saints. I think they could use to add another linebacker. Alex Anzalone gone. He signed with Detroit. And Demario Davis is not getting any younger. So that will end today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Mock Draft 6.0 in the books. Within the next week, I plan on releasing my first big board video. Usually, I would have done one before the Combine. Since there was no Combine this year, I never got around to it, but I do plan on releasing that within the next week. So I hope you guys are excited. Let me know what you thought of the mock draft in the comments below. And I am out. Peace.